My partner David's new friend Tracy crossed boundaries, then he lied about it. After I caught their intimate dynamic, he said, "I didn't want you to get the wrong impression." Now I'm left questioning if trust can ever be restored. Can we find common ground again? A 28-year-old female met my current partner David, a 29-year-old male, 3 years ago. I encountered him while traveling, and starting a relationship was not at all part of my plans, but it unfolded unexpectedly. He provided a sense of safety. We would hike, travel, and enjoy each other's company whenever possible. I have always been quite resistant to relationships due to my independence and sporadic travel schedule. I communicated this to him from the outset, and he was fine with it. Not that I was seeking his approval, but it made me feel more secure to be in love and supported by someone in that way. We have been together for 2 years now. I have traveled less, but honestly, I have enjoyed this change as well. We were in a long-distance situation for a few months because of my job, and I plan to return to him after a few months. However, those few months turned into an additional 3 months because I was frequently in and out of hospitals and later discovered that my endometriosis was flaring up significantly. During those 3 months, I sensed a sudden distance in our communication. So we were apart for a total of 4 months, from late December to March. During that time, he mentioned he had recently joined a small group of friends, and they would gather at a new friend's place to drink wine and converse, which sounded great. But he also told me he spent the night there, along with another couple, or would leave around 3 a.m. The sleeping arrangements were reportedly the couple in the guest room, my partner on the sofa, and the host in her room. A couple of days after Valentine's Day, while I was in and out of the hospital 1,000 miles away, he shared that he went out to dinner with a coworker who told him that if he did not stop talking about work, she would not treat him to dinner. He mentioned several outings to rivers, thermal springs, and nature hikes during which he spoke about his new friends, whom he referred to as the club. I did not feel particularly skeptical, although it struck me as odd that he did not provide much more detail beyond this. I later discovered that the host, coworker, and club member were all the same person. Let's call her Jane. I flew back at the end of March and sent him my itinerary, hoping he would meet me at the airport since I was arriving late on Friday at midnight. I now recognize that I should have explicitly requested his presence at the airport after such a prolonged separation. I felt saddened that he did not come to greet me on the day of my arrival. I arrived late on Friday night, and Tracy organized a conference at work on that Friday, during which my partner assisted with the event. Later that night, my partner and another couple gathered at Tracy's place for a wine night. The following morning, he told me he was hungover from such an enjoyable gathering. At this point, I was unsure who this person was. All I knew was that they were new acquaintances. I decided to spend the week with family since I work remotely instead of taking the 3-hour car ride to see him. I also sensed that something felt off and that I might be intruding on something. I missed him that week and communicated this to him, concluding our conversation by offering to visit him over the weekend. We met up that weekend after several months apart, but he had some work to do while we were together. He texted Tracy to check on the status of a few projects, and upon reading one of her replies aloud, which said it was all fine and for him to spend time with his girlfriend, we parted ways after the weekend because of work, and I visited him again the following weekend. I arrived Friday night, and he asked if it would be all right to hang out at Tracy's for board games and dinner, as he wanted me to meet his new group of friends. It was a pleasant gathering, but I also noticed a lot of playful banter between my partner, another male coworker named Max, and Tracy. I felt slightly uncomfortable as it was a new dynamic. They would tease and poke fun at Tracy about being picky and only liking the finest, most luxurious, expensive things. That night while we were drinking and playing board games, Tracy's hand accidentally tipped over an empty can of beer since we were all seated on the floor. She laughed hysterically while apologizing and playfully tapped Max's upper leg. Max's girlfriend was away for fieldwork that weekend. We had a great time, and it was past midnight when, before departing, Tracy asked my partner to wash the dishes. Everyone else was ready to go, but since my partner was their ride, we all stood around the kitchen waiting for him to finish the dishes. I attempted to help, but he insisted I not, so I ended up just drying a few of the dishes in the meantime. With leftover food, the club, Max, Tracy, and David decided to meet for breakfast to consume the leftovers and then go tubing in the river. We had breakfast the next morning at Tracy's, and I was open to the dynamic, receptive, smiling, and being present. While we were eating, Tracy was sitting next to me and scratched my hand twice. It was a crowded table, and I did not think much of it, so I simply moved my chair and plate further away from her. Tracy was seated across from my partner. We finished breakfast, boarded the car, and Max asked me what my plans were for the following weekend. I replied that I would be visiting David again. David informed me that they had planned to celebrate Tracy's birthday together with a lot of other people at a cabin or lodge, and that I was invited and he was excited to attend. Tracy had rented out a space for the celebration, and her friends were to stay the night too. Max then mentioned that Tracy was having a birthday celebration at the lodge next weekend, stating that he was driving and looked at Tracy, who was sitting next to him, and asked her if she had anything to say or add. Tracy nudged him, leading to an awkward silence before she said, "Yes, it's my birthday next weekend." That was it. She didn't elaborate further. I refrained from following up with anything else because it felt like I was not part of this plan. I felt confused and uneasy because my partner had mentioned we were invited. This was the moment I began to suspect if Tracy was the person my partner had been having dinner with, going to breakfast with, watching movies with at her place, just the two of them, and cooking with a couple of others, Max and Matilda, drinking into the early hours and going tubing in the river. We arrived at the river and went tubing, having a fantastic time, and then sat down to have dinner after a long day in the water. I found the seating arrangement peculiar, especially after the earlier confusion in the car. Max and David sat across from each other, with David next to Tracy and Tracy across from me. It felt a bit awkward, and the banter continued, with both of them teasing Tracy about her extensive travels and how this dinner was probably too simple for her. I felt very weary, sensing that I was interrupting or caught in the middle of this trio. During the drive back, she asked David to play his music, and she sang along the entire ride. We dropped her off, and then David dropped us both off. I was extremely exhausted trying to process the day. Afterward, we went to sleep. I had to drive back to the city for work, and we planned to see each other the following weekend. By Wednesday night, I began feeling terrible. I had a fever and a cold. We spoke over the phone, and David mentioned that he no longer wanted to go on the lodge trip that weekend. He broadly stated that he felt bothered by something someone said, but did not elaborate on what it was or who had said it. I told him I was quite ill and that it would be lovely for him to spend time with me this weekend if he was no longer attending the lodge trip. I emphasized that it was strange for him to back out of the lodge trip, since he had been so excited when he told me about it. Thursday arrived and I could hardly speak, so I suggested that seeing each other might not be the best idea to prevent him from getting sick, but I comically mentioned that I selfishly wanted to cuddle all weekend without any pressure. He agreed that it would be nice to visit me this time. When Friday night came, we talked on the phone for several hours. A few minutes after our conversation ended, he mentioned that Max had texted him, attempting to convince him to go. David told me he was tired and had a lot of work to catch up on over the weekend, but he might entertain the idea of going since Max was persuasive. I told him to keep me updated on his decision, but when I texted him the next morning, there was no response until 5 p.m. He informed me that he was okay, had not had service all day, and that Max had shown up at his door in the morning to drive to the lodge. He stated that they were having an acceptable time and that Tracy's friends were not impressed with a dish we both loved, which left him feeling a bit disappointed. I froze momentarily as this was all new to me and I didn't respond right away. When I did, I said I was glad he was okay, wished him fun, and congratulated Tracy on her birthday. That night, I broke out in hives for some unknown reason. He asked if I was free to talk at around 8 p.m., to which I replied yes. During our conversation, he asked if everything was okay. I responded that I was just ill and tired. The following weekend, I moved in with David as planned after being away for so long. For months, our weekend nights consisted of gatherings at Tracy's place with a few others. One evening, Matilda brought up the lodge night. David had previously mentioned it was a group of Tracy's friends along with Max and Matilda, but Matilda made it sound like it involved only the four of them. She mentioned that David was in charge of the music and filling the hot tub with foam. Matilda found it amusing that David was taking so long to practically disinfect the tub. That night, David complained of a headache. It must have been due to the heat. I chose not to bring up the topic any further or ask questions, but I felt unsettled. I trusted that the truth would emerge without me having to intervene. We then moved into a larger space together, and David was very eager to have his friends over. We had not fully settled in, and he asked if it would be all right to invite Max, Matilda, Tracy, and a couple of Tracy's friends over for dinner at our dusty but homey place. I felt it was rushed and asked if it could wait until we were settled, but it seemed everyone was available that weekend, so he preferred to have the gathering sooner rather than later. They arrived, and Tracy brought dessert. We told everyone to keep their shoes on due to the dust on the floor. Everyone except Tracy kept their shoes on, and when it was time to leave, she made a big deal about her feet being dirty and stared at me. That night, she washed the dishes with her friend after we insisted she did not need to, and the next morning, we noticed a piece of our blender was missing, rendering it unusable for months until a friend provided a replacement a few months later. As time passed, one weekend, David and I decided to spend the entire day tending to the garden, and that evening, Tracy asked if we wanted to have dinner together. We agreed, picked her up, and she was all dressed up. As we sat down to eat, David and Tracy engaged in work-related discussions while I listened. Another one of Tracy's friends joined us for dinner that night, and I felt relieved, but Tracy and David continued to talk exclusively among themselves, primarily about work. I cannot recall exactly what my partner shared, but Tracy kept touching his arm and nudging him while smiling. Tracy then playfully pushed David while laughing, and her friend advised her to stop because it appeared I was uncomfortable. I laughed and shrugged it off, though I felt my cheeks flush. Throughout the evening, she continued to be very touchy with David. Claiming she felt unwell, she suggested going to another place for drinks. I stated I was tired and would not be drinking, but I could join them if David agreed to go. We went to a bar, she ordered water, I ordered water, and David had a beer just like her friend. The atmosphere was bizarre. I felt out of place and uncomfortable. A couple of times, I excused myself to the bathroom and David asked if everything was all right. I assured him it was. Tracy sat across from me while David was seated at the far end of the table. I asked Tracy if she wanted me to accompany her to a nearby pharmacy, just a block away, to get medicine for what she suggested might be an allergic reaction. She declined, saying it was okay. On the way to drop her home, while I was driving, she asked if we could drive to the pharmacy to pick up some pills. Since everything was closed by then and the nearest pharmacy was 15 minutes away, open 24 hours, we arrived at the pharmacy, only for her to discover she did not have enough money for the pills, so she asked her friend. While her friend looked for change, David began searching for his wallet. Her friend could not gather sufficient change, and David was short as well, so I lent him some money to hand over to her while she was out of the car and he was still next to me. I noticed he wanted to open the door to hand her the money, but the exchange was quick enough to simply do it from where we sat. She accepted the money without saying thank you. The ride home was silent. When we arrived, I explained to David how I felt. He dismissed it as a joke and claimed the touchiness did not bother him. I questioned him about the lodge and pointed out Matilda had made it sound like it was only a group of 4. David apologized and confessed that it had indeed only been the 4 of them. He explained he did not want me to have a negative impression, so he told a white lie. He shared that Max and Matilda shared the bed, he slept in a single bed in the same room, and Tracy utilized the nicer room since it was her birthday. I expressed that while I understood there was no need to lie, I would have been okay with the truth, but now that I knew he was untruthful, my trust and confidence in our relationship felt compromised. The irony is palpable. I found myself questioning who invited him to dinner with the condition that he not discuss work, the person who he watched a movie with who he claimed was Tracy, and that he told me they would have breakfast together while I was away. He was on the phone, so I assumed he was texting Tracy, and I inquired if she was feeling any better. He seemed to be glued to his phone. "Oh, I am not sure, I haven't spoken with her," he said. The following morning, I informed him I was considering visiting my parents for a few days because my mom had called to share that she was in and out of hospitals. I spent the entire morning researching transportation, found a trip, and shared my plans with him. He said he was sad to see me go but understood and hoped my mom would be all right. He drove me to the airport and we had dinner with friends who genuinely respected our relationship, which made me feel much better. What a difference. I spent 5 days with my mom, who improved significantly. Upon returning home, David informed me that one of Tracy's friends had passed away. He asked if it would make me uncomfortable if he attended the memorial and funeral with them. I told him he was free to do as he wished, but I hoped that both of us would act in ways that would nurture our relationship instead of jeopardizing it. It hurt that he felt the need to text and ask what to do when the answer seemed straightforward. Do whatever you want, as long as the people and actions involved do not threaten or harm our relationship. A year passed and the relationship became healthier, but every time Tracy was mentioned, I could not help feeling sadness, leading me to distance myself for a day. I explained to him that it was not intentional, this was all new to me, and I was attempting to navigate it as best as possible. He replied that he wanted to know how to address things to make it easier for me. I struggled with this response, as it seemed like I was asking for more than he could provide, and while this is my first relationship and I do not have a playbook, I did not imagine myself engaging in the behaviors he demonstrated. I knew people are not perfect, and I did not expect them to be. However, I began to wonder if this was cyclical behavior, if I was not moving forward, or if it was more complicated than I realized. Another year passed, and soon it was Tracy's birthday again. My family was visiting my grandmother for her birthday in a town 5 hours away from where we live. We spent the weekend with my family and had a wonderful time. Since I work remotely, I planned to spend time with my family until Wednesday night, while David had to return to work on Monday. He left on Monday morning and that evening sent me a screenshot from one of Tracy's friends informing him it was Tracy's birthday and we were invited to join them for dinner at a restaurant. The message was sent early in the morning, and although we communicated throughout the day, he shared the screenshot with me a couple of hours before dinner. The screenshot contained no reply from David. He wrote to me saying he was very tired but that Max and others were going, so he was contemplating stopping by with our dog and asked if it made me uncomfortable. He added that he was fine staying home as well. I chose not to respond to this because I did not want to control anyone's actions, feeling he had already made his decision. I replied, wishing him an enjoyable time and sending my best to everyone, along with congratulations to the birthday girl. The next morning, when I asked how everything went, he mentioned that the food was not very good and that work had been fairly acceptable. I kept my thoughts to myself, but I had craved that restaurant several times, yet we had not visited because he believed it was too expensive. We did eat there once, but that was because I treated him. Feeling a bit insecure, a new feeling for me, I recognized that he probably did not mean for it to come across that way. So I found myself apart from him, as planned, spending time with family until Wednesday. Since Monday morning, I felt a sad distance. I missed him during our time apart, and while I was not pleased that he ended up attending the dinner, they are his friends, and I had never told someone not to do anything they desired, nor did I plan to become that person. I find myself wondering if trust can ever be regained and what steps are required to achieve that, as I genuinely feel happy in this relationship. However, each time Tracy is around, I cannot help but feel sadness. I am open to having her over and hanging out, but we have not done so since that excessively touchy-feely night 6 months ago. I know my partner interacts with her due to work and collaborative projects, but as a unit, we have not hung out together. I welcome any advice or clarity on this matter. Thank you. Story 2. I poured my heart into a friendship with Derek, 37, after he helped me, 22, escape my abusive home. Redirect that energy someplace else. He snapped when I offered him art inspired by my journey. Now, 4 months later, I've been ghosted, left shattered and confused. What happened? Hello, I am a 22-year-old male who does not post very frequently on Reddit, and this is quite a lengthy story, so please bear with me. Last year, I met a man at a warehouse job. I will refer to him as Derek, a 37-year-old male. We were coworkers, and he was my instructor for the job I signed up for. Through some casual conversation, I got to know him a bit. He seemed like a really cool person at the time. He had a passion for chess and was struggling to find his way back into studying calculus. I had graduated with a degree in engineering, loved mathematics, and enjoyed playing chess as well. We were the only individuals in the facility who knew how to play. I learned about his background prior to coming to the warehouse where we worked together. He had apparently enjoyed a very lively life outside of work, and seeing that he was happy really made me happy, yet it also made me sad at the same time. I did not express this to him directly, but I grew up and was still trapped in, at the time of meeting him, in an abusive household where none of my family members cared about me. I sought comfort in finding friends and meaningful connections wherever I went, most often through coworkers. I informed Derek that I was planning to save money for a car so that I could try to have a more vibrant life outside of work, but I lacked the means to get home efficiently. I could either take the bus, which was a 3-hour trip from my workplace, or use Uber or Lyft, which averaged 20 per ride and inexplicably over 70 on weekends when I wanted to work overtime. Therefore, it was not feasible for commuting to work. He offered to help me travel home from work. I was overjoyed. There were instances when he could not assist me in getting home, so I asked some of my other coworkers, and they willingly collaborated to help me get home for the following months. For the first time in my life, I established a system that allowed me to save enough money to achieve a major goal. During one of our chess games, he eventually revealed that he was a guitarist and that he occasionally posted on his Instagram account. He also mentioned that he played in a local band that lacked mainstream recognition. This completely astounded me because his corporate-friendly appearance starkly contradicted the type of music he played. Ideas began to materialize in my mind. I had never considered playing a real instrument until he shared that information. I suggested that after I acquired a car, I could go out and buy a guitar for myself so I could learn to play as well. I told Derek that I had composed music myself in the past, but I had never used real instruments since I did not have the means to do so before starting the warehouse job. Then came the day when I finally had enough money to purchase a very inexpensive used car for approximately $5,000. It was nothing fancy, and a few of my close friends remarked that it appeared to be on its last legs, but when I drove it home, I was ecstatic. Derek and my coworkers had helped me achieve a significant milestone in my life. Excited, I asked Derek for his phone number because I believed he was someone worth including in my life, and we ended up having a bit of a conversation, though it was usually me who initiated the discussions with him most of the time. I shared with him my accomplishments now that I owned a car and where I could go. Just the thought of visiting my friends' homes motivated me every day at work. However, I refrained from attempting to visit Derek's house, as he had mentioned he was going through some personal matters. Then one day during a game of chess, Derek told me that I was texting him too much. I was unsure about what too much meant when I had only asked him for suggestions on where to drive now that I owned a car. He never provided an explanation of what he deemed excessive, and I felt really sad because I felt as though I had somehow become too much for him. I did not communicate with him for over a week. That week was when he took a few days off work, and out of respect for his words, I abstained from initiating any communication until he returned. I even watched his favorite movie of all time and made it my goal to perhaps curb my enthusiasm around him. When the day came for his return to work, he appeared different. Something had evidently changed in his life. He was more reserved and less outgoing. He never explained what had caused this change, but I told him I thought he was an intriguing person and I wanted to take the positive qualities I saw in him and try to do something good for myself. He stated that he appreciated that but was not open to deep friendships at that point in his life. I was unclear about what this meant and he did not elaborate. We stopped playing chess and he began focusing more on his job. I respected his space and left him alone. I, however, did inform him that I planned to pick up a guitar after work by the end of that conversation. Derek's videos online had motivated me to pursue a new hobby, regardless of his openness to friendships. But then he informed me that he was going to perform in a show with his band the following month, and it was not too far from the city where I lived. Considering that I had finally obtained a car, it felt like everything had aligned perfectly for that event. Derek and my coworkers had assisted me in getting a car. I had just bought a basic acoustic guitar, and I had recently watched his favorite film featuring two kids writing a report and discovering their music changed the world in the future. I felt there could not have been a better conclusion to my car story arc. I would be able to drive myself to this event, meet new people, and perhaps make new friends. On the day of the event, I met Derek at a bar where several bands were preparing for the show. Derek chose to drink while I did not, as I had driven all the way there. It was exhilarating. People were dressed up in Halloween costumes and enjoying themselves. I stood beside Derek as he introduced me to the rest of his bandmates. I greeted them warmly and expressed my interest in their musical style. The show proceeded without a hitch. When Derek's band took the stage, I joined in a conga line with everyone, and everyone was having a great time. In the midst of Derek's performance, I experienced something within myself that I believe changed my life forever. I felt an overwhelming sense of peace unlike anything I had ever encountered. Surrounded by individuals having fun and people in their element, along with new friends gathered in one place, a feeling emerged within me conveying something akin to, dude, your life does not have to remain the same with your family forever. Keep your head up. Everything will be all right. After the show, Derek had consumed too much alcohol and was unable to find a ride home, as his car had been inoperable prior to the show. I offered to help him get home with the car that he had helped me acquire. He accepted, and we had an enjoyable time driving him back to his place. At his home, I thanked him for everything he had done to help me achieve my goals while I worked with him, and then I drove back home. This was the absolute happiest I had ever felt in my life, and I will carry that memory with me forever. Less than a week later, I was laid off from my warehouse job, and I was completely devastated. I could no longer physically meet with my coworkers. However, Derek agreed to serve as a reference for one of my future jobs, and I was quickly able to get back on my feet before my financial situation worsened. My passion for playing the guitar intensified, and I asked Derek several questions regarding the basics of guitar playing and the techniques I had observed during his shows. He was not particularly talkative about it and almost never responded to my inquiries. I did not point this out to him and chose to be patient, as he mentioned that work had become more stressful after I was laid off. Derek also invited me to his personal church, where he played in their band, and to the gym he frequently attended afterward. I felt excitement about discussing religious topics and consistently working out with a friend at the gym for the first time. I diligently observed him closely to learn from his performance in the band, and I was able to both learn from and teach Derek a few new techniques at the gym. I had never been more physically fit in my life and lost 17 pounds. During one church session, I established to Derek that I was an artist and that I would absolutely love to create art for his band. I could not tell at the moment, but he looked somewhat worried about something. He never explained what it was, however. At one point, I searched online for a copy of his band's music, but discovered that only 2 copies of their first album existed for purchase. One was in the United States, and the other was all the way in Canada. I drove all the way to the edge of the city to collect it, intending to place it on my shelf later as a cherished reminder of what he had created with his friends. But then Derek changed again. He recently informed me that he was dating a girl and I was genuinely happy for him. I eventually met her at church and she was very sweet and kind. However, his demeanor became even more reclusive. He stopped going to the gym regularly due to the stress he was facing at work. I made sure to tell him that I was rooting for him to keep moving forward even when he was unavailable. During our last gym session, he abruptly stated that his girlfriend suggested he do something positive concerning his health, and he became irrationally upset while talking to me. I had not asked him to disclose what was troubling him, but I at least assured him that he did not need to pursue something if it did not make him comfortable. He dropped the subject, and we never revisited his outburst. I was honestly a little scared that he behaved that way in public. Later, I browsed through his Instagram in search of additional information about his techniques and realized that the same guitar he used during his show was the same one he had rebuilt himself. I grew excited and inquired if there was a story behind it, as it appeared to have endured quite a lot due to its condition. I also mentioned that I was working on something special for him in relation to that specific guitar. On the last Sunday of last year, we met for church. Derek was performing in the band that day, so he did not have much time to converse in between rounds. I approached him to ask questions about his guitar, but he appeared extremely annoyed with me. He expressed that he did not wish to share that information, and I felt a bit disheartened, but I respected his privacy. He informed me that my inquiries about his guitar and his techniques made him feel very uncomfortable, yet I assured him that was not my intention. I had wanted to keep it a surprise until it was finished, but I showed him an unfinished sketch of him performing with his band, inspired by my favorite comic book series. It depicted him executing a jump kick in a crowd while holding a beer and his guitar. I explained that I just wanted to show my appreciation for everything he had done for me up to that point, not intrude on his mental well-being by invading his personal life. He glanced at it and then told me with a stern expression, "How about you redirect that energy somewhere else?" In the church, the very space he invited me to when I was at my lowest point in life. My passions, not only as an artist but also as a beginner guitarist. I immediately left him alone for the remainder of the week, with no explanation given for his words. I followed up with a particularly long text the following Sunday, stating that I respected his space and boundaries, but his dismissal of my attempt to give him a gift for the positive experiences we had shared was cruel. I had wished to draw each band member individually, beginning with him. Several days later, he told me that he had no room in his life for deep friendships, and that I could only interact with him at church as his boundary. Like a reasonable person, I arrived at church the next week seeking him out because I genuinely wanted to discuss this matter with him. He was not there. I went to the gym looking for him, but he was not present there either. I searched in all the places where he might be and texted him, pleading to meet somewhere to talk. Then I discovered he had blocked me from both his phone and Instagram profile. I had never posted anything on his profile or on his posts, and had no intention of doing so. I only followed him out of courtesy for knowing him and eagerly watched his videos to learn finger techniques. Derek was literally the only guitarist I knew in person, and therefore, the only individual I felt I could reach out to for tips regarding the instrument. Upon discovering this, I was devastated. He never indicated to me what I did that made him uncomfortable or what I had done that was so wrong that the idea of drawing art for his band was so detestable that he would cut off all communication with me. I wanted to express to him how profoundly he had changed my life and how much I wanted to take up the same hobby he had inspired in me. As of today, it has been 4 months since that incident. I still have other friends and retain my passion for learning the guitar, but my life feels noticeably more empty now. I wanted to use my skills to do something nice for this man, and he discarded me as if I were worthless. The last time I attempted to contact him was when I sent him a couple of voicemails expressing my concern for his mental well-being, given the timing of his gym outburst and the church incident. I stated that I genuinely wanted to support his band because everything associated with it had significant meaning to me. He has yet to respond to any attempts at communication. I am unsure how to proceed at this point. What should I do? In summary, I befriended a coworker, bonded with him while obtaining a car. Then he lost his temper after I showed him a sketch and ghosted me for literally no reason. Story 3. My year-long relationship with my girlfriend, who I once adored, feels like a heavy weight. I feel like I can never get things right, I confess, as her irritation sours our moments. Despite her kindness, her constant negativity leaves me questioning am I holding on too tightly. I have been with my girlfriend for over a year. For your information, we are in a younger lesbian relationship. We are quite similar and have troubled backgrounds, and neither of us is particularly inclined toward relationships. However, we have both always desired to improve. Despite this, after everything that has transpired, I do not know how much longer I can endure this negativity. I am an ambivert but tend to lean toward being extroverted, while she is more introverted. Additionally, I am more of a patient optimist, striving to see the best in situations, while, as you might guess, she is not. She often fails to regulate her emotions and frequently snaps at me or shows visible irritation to the extent that I can feel it in my chest. There are moments when she glares at me, which is painfully obvious even in front of others, and they have pointed this out. To be fair, she has a lot on her plate and often feels stressed or overwhelmed. However, it seems that she is rarely not overwhelmed, no matter the situation. It can be something minor that should not matter, yet she seems to be bothered by everything, even as sometimes she appears apathetic and does not grasp why certain things upset others. She has always struggled with insecurity, especially since she recently gained weight. Do not misunderstand me, before being with her I was brimming with confidence, but someone said something to me that plunged me into a downward spiral, making me the most insecure I have ever been. Eventually, after changing my style, working out, and starting medication, I managed to get back on track. However, I wonder if my being in very good shape makes her feel worse. She has become more insecure and does not often compliment me, and for a time, she would almost never do so unless I was visibly down on myself. Now she offers compliments occasionally, but it seems that her own insecurities make it challenging for her to accept my changes. I want to emphasize that while she may sound terrible, she is actually an incredible person. She is the type of individual I admire and would like to be compared to. She was my friend first, and for a good reason, but as a partner, I see different sides of her personality. She's a people pleaser, which is amusing because it often feels like it is her way with me. There are times she surprises me with dinner and thoughtful gifts, saying things like, "I thought of you and I thought you would like this." She takes on the tasks I despise, even though she does not enjoy them either, but she knows it will alleviate some weight from my shoulders, which is confusing yet genuinely sweet. However, most of the time, she seems to be angry or irritated. I suspect she may have borderline personality disorder or bipolar disorder, but according to her most recent therapist, it is merely a mix of obsessive-compulsive disorder and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. This makes it difficult for me to not rationalize her behavior. Even the smallest, most trivial issues can make me feel like I can never get things right, which is odd since she asks for my help with almost everything. I am a very independent person and try to figure things out on my own. However, if she is unsure how to handle something, she asks me for assistance, even if it is just a matter of Googling something. Sometimes, though, I do not know how to help her, which leads her to become frustrated and snap at me saying, "Can you just try?" For instance, she did not have her license or a car until recently. We are well past the age for driver's education, and I prefer to keep our identities private, and her home life was not the most stable. However, I would drive nearly an hour each way, sometimes multiple times a week, just to visit her or bring her back to my place. She contributed some money for gas, which indicates that I have done a lot to support her in various aspects, such as obtaining a job, license, and car. I enjoy going out, making plans, and figuring things out as I go along, even if something goes awry. She does not handle unexpected situations well and easily becomes irritated. I like watching television, going to the gym, and engaging in my other hobbies. She wants to be included in everything or seems to expect that I will refrain from doing anything if she does not wish to participate. If she chooses not to join in, she gives off an annoyed vibe, which often leads to an argument that wastes the time I intended to spend doing those activities. I watch the movies and television shows she enjoys, and I listen to the music she likes. I have to ask her multiple times to engage with my interests, while she used to be obsessed with them to the point where it sometimes felt overwhelming. For a long time now, she has hardly participated in any of my interests. Furthermore, I feel unable to be alone because she always wants us to spend time together. When I do not miss her after having just been together, she acts strangely. I have tried talking about our issues, but she tends to become very defensive initially, only to later come around, genuinely showing that she cares and offering heartfelt apologies. However, she does not ask about my day and believes I should prompt her or talk about something when I want to discuss something, much like she does. In contrast, she is so attentive with others, behaving like a mother figure when someone needs to talk and is known for being helpful. However, with me, I feel like I have to prompt her both indirectly and directly. Today, I had a very bad day mentally. I briefly posted about it, and she saw my post but failed to ask about it. I wanted a partner to reassure me that it was okay, that I would be all right, and that someone was there for me. My therapist pointed out that when I talk about our relationship, I often sound like I am experiencing it alone, which highlights how consuming that feeling is. Nonetheless, we later went for a walk, during which she talked about her day at work for an entire hour, although she complained the whole way back about not wanting to take the walk, claiming it was a waste of time. She talks far more than I do, and I can rarely get a word in. She despises it when I interrupt her or change the subject, viewing it as a sign that I am not listening. I acknowledge that I am not a perfect partner and have my own issues. I can also get defensive. However, she seems to become upset in the moment, then quickly moves on while I continue to carry those feelings. I am unsure if I am holding on too tightly or if it is because she typically initiates most arguments, making it easier for her to forget them. Nonetheless, she often embodies a negative viewpoint. Something always seems to be wrong in her life, and it feels as though I can never do anything right while she also does not inquire about my feelings. I will not lie, we previously broke up about 3 months ago before our 1-year anniversary because she did not want to hurt me and needed to work on herself. The situation was a bit messy. We got back together and lived together for the first time for over a month before she moved in with a friend, whom I dislike and who takes advantage of her kindness. According to her, our relationship has improved, but I sit here wondering if that is truly the case. Perhaps we bicker less. However, I am still somewhat hurt, and my emotions fluctuate because everything is so complicated. I am not seeking advice, I am merely expressing my thoughts. Perhaps I made a mistake by going back, but leaving would now be more difficult because there are positive aspects to our relationship. I dislike the idea of leaving when things could improve, as I believe in her. She genuinely is a kind-hearted person. She has admitted that she has become somewhat complacent because I am the first person who has loved her for who she is and supported her beyond merely being a girlfriend. Nevertheless, I am exhausted from feeling sad, hurt, or alone. I do not want to let her go as she was my friend first and I do love her, but I struggle with how she behaves at times. I appreciate her for who she is, but it does not feel like she reciprocates that appreciation for me at times. I think I need to leave, but accepting that and taking action is the most challenging part. Letting go and imagining her being with someone else feels heartbreaking because I am still in love with her, just hurt. Summary, we were friends first, and now after being together for over a year, we face various issues, but we have both always aimed for improvement. She is a very kind, thoughtful, and sweet person who can perform lovely gestures for me that alleviate my burdens or make me feel cherished. However, she often adopts a negative demeanor or can be low-key mean, making me question her feelings about me as an individual. I feel alone or off due to her snapping at me, and I do not know how much longer I can continue to be dragged into her negative perspective on life. Story 4. Fired over inappropriate behavior at my coffee shop job, I was blindsided by cowardly accusations from colleagues who joked about sex with me all along. You were unsafe to work with, they said, but why was I the target of this betrayal? Now I'm left in shock, questioning everything. Throwaway for anonymity. For context, everyone in this situation is over 18. Yesterday, I received a message from the co-owner of the coffee company I work for. He expressed a desire to speak with me in person about some concerns that had come to his attention. I assumed that it might be related to my frequent requests for time off since I am walking the stage next week. He insisted on meeting in person, but I informed him that I would be busy for the rest of the week. He agreed to have a phone call instead. Feeling confused, I contacted one of my team leads. Unfortunately, she had been giving me the cold shoulder for about a month. It started with her, and then several others began to ignore my presence or were very distant. I became extremely upset because I enjoyed this job and could not understand what was happening. As a neurodivergent and visibly queer person, I was familiar with such behavior, but I had previously felt comfortable with my other queer, though primarily cis Gen Z coworkers. I am 23 for context. The team lead I messaged ignored my attempts to reach out. I opened Instagram and realized that no one had been messaging me as they used to for about a month. I thought that since I was really just a coworker and had been absent, they had forgotten about me, which was whatever. I browsed some coworkers' accounts to message one of them and discovered that nearly all my coworkers had either unfollowed or blocked me. I began to cry. I could not grasp what was happening, especially since they had been the ones texting me first during our last few conversations. I sent some memes and received no response, or they replied to my stories, and then, out of nowhere, silence. The co-owner finally called me and said that the owner was also on the line. My stomach sank. I realized it must be something serious, but I was still confused. The co-owner went on to explain that several of my coworkers had approached him to report me for sexual behavior that was deemed too inappropriate for the workplace, leading them to feel unsafe working with me. I became hysterical. The only thing stopping me from screaming in shock was my effort to remain composed during the call and that I was in a campus building working on something when I took the call. Fortunately, I was alone. He stated that due to the severity of my actions, I was ultimately terminated. I felt dizzy. I almost vomited. I was crying so hard I could hardly see. I never expected this, especially considering the nature of the jokes my coworkers directed toward me. I thought of all the times I had let their crude comments slide while on duty, responding with laughter or simply saying, "Whoa, hey," and trying to leave it at that. To be told that I was unsafe to work with, it felt like I was in a nightmare. He asked if I had any awareness of the way I was making people feel. He allowed me a few minutes to compose myself. Eventually, I responded with a resounding no, not at all. He explained that the nature of the behavior was primarily in how I joked with people. I immediately felt embarrassed. The fact that my coworkers initiated sexual jokes with me, encouraged them, and kept the jokes going only to result in this. I promptly apologized to them and expressed my deep remorse, hoping they would pass that on. The co-owner noted that it was clear I was remorseful and shocked by the situation, which was true. I never denied making someone uncomfortable as I have always taken these situations very seriously. However, I could only think of the times they made me uncomfortable first, and I attempted to brush it off or respond nonchalantly. I started with my apologies. I told him how deeply embarrassed I was and that I was sorry they had to have this conversation, that I regretted bringing such energy into their workplace, and that I had ever made someone feel that way. He expressed that it was quite clear it was just jokes that had gone too far, and that he had already spoken to other coworkers, managers, and leads about what constitutes appropriate behavior during shifts. The more I pondered that comment, the more disheartened I felt that I had not been part of those discussions before it escalated to this point. Ultimately, I had been absent for a month. Before my absence, I had distanced myself from everyone. I realized that these were jokes I should not have been making while on duty. Several coworkers would make jokes that were not safe for work. Occasionally, someone would comment, "Whoa, that was romantic," if we accidentally bumped hands or hips. Two coworkers joked about threesomes and being in a polyamorous relationship with one of their boyfriends. They showed me pictures of the sex toys they received for one another. One even sent me a nude while on duty, which I almost opened in front of a customer. I snapped at him not to do that while another person and he laughed. I never reported him because we joked together and I thought it was all in good fun. He would initiate and encourage the jokes, plus he was in a severely abusive situation and needed the job. When I distanced myself from these coworkers and ceased making such jokes, I thought that would be the end of it. I have obsessive-compulsive disorder, am autistic, and present as a visibly masculine androgynous queer individual. I confided too much about my identity while others were sharing their sex lives, making crude remarks and ultimately exhibiting behavior I should have reported first. I trusted them too much. Regardless of whether I did hurt people, the way this situation was handled has left me in a state of disrepair and utter shock. I cannot stop having intrusive thoughts about being told I was terminated, remembering all the sexual jokes they made, the pictures I received or was shown, and the notion that they might be laughing behind my back because they won. They got me fired, and I do not know what I did to warrant this. I was not informed of any specific behaviors. I was simply told I was unsafe to work with due to the jokes I made. The co-owner said he would allow me to express my side if I wished because of how obviously remorseful I was. I sensed concern in his voice, indicating that something else might be happening. I acknowledged that I understood the termination was final and that he was only just receiving this information now. I would never wish to dismiss someone's feelings of discomfort if they expressed that, but I went on to detail the situations I faced before I decided to pull away and modify my behavior. He assured me he would certainly be discussing this matter with the individuals I referenced, but I hold very low hopes if this is how far they would go to harm someone they merely found annoying to work with. I apologize for the length of this message. I am still trying to process everything. The few friends I have confided in have been really supportive and understanding, stating that it felt like social murder of a queer and autistic individual. I am still assessing my behavior and understanding how to do better moving forward, but even while overanalyzing everything I did while on duty, I can only think of instances when people approached me with sexual and crude comments. I still do not want to dismiss someone's experience if I made them uncomfortable, though. At least it was just a silly coffee shop. I am about to graduate and hopefully will secure a position in my desired field, as much as working in a cafe was enjoyable for me.